Hey everyone, welcome to our podcast. I'm Alex, and this is Maria. Today we're talking about something we all experience, self-doubt. It's that feeling when you wonder if you're good enough or if you can really do something.
Hi everyone, exactly Alex. Whether it's thinking you're not smart enough for a class or worrying about making the right choice, self-doubt can really hold us back. And it happens to everyone, even when it doesn't look like it.
I remember once when I almost didn't try out for a sports team because I didn't think I'd make it. Turns out, I made it, and did great. But self-doubt almost stopped me from even trying.
I know what you mean, Alex. I used to doubt if I could speak up in meetings at work. I'd worry. What if I say the wrong thing? But later I learned that I was actually doing just fine. Those doubts were all in my head.
So, today, we're going to talk about what self-doubt is and why it happens. More importantly, we'll give you some easy tips to help overcome it, so you can feel more confident.
We'll also share some cool stories, and by the end of this episode, we want you to feel like you can push past those doubts and go after your goals.
All right, let's get started. All right, now that we've introduced the topic, let's talk about some words you might hear when people talk about self-doubt. These are important to understand because they help us make sense of what's going on in our heads.
Yeah. One term you might hear a lot is imposter syndrome. This happens when you feel like a fraud, like you don't really deserve your success or you're not as good as others think you are. Even people who are really successful feel this way.
Exactly. It's like when you get a good grade or a promotion, and instead of feeling proud, you think, I just got lucky, or they'll find out I'm not really that good.
Another important word is self-esteem. This is how we feel about ourselves overall, whether we think we're valuable, capable, or worthy. When self-doubt creeps in, it can hurt our self-esteem.
Right. If you have low self-esteem, it's easier to believe those negative thoughts about yourself, like, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be able to do this.
Then there's the inner critic. This is that little voice in your head that's always pointing out what you're doing wrong. It's like having a mean coach who's never happy with your performance.
Yeah, the inner critic can be tough. It's always focusing on your mistakes or making you feel like you're not doing enough. But the good news is that we can learn to quiet that voice and be kinder to ourselves.
Which brings us to the last term, self-compassion. This means being kind and understanding to yourself, especially when you make mistakes. Instead of beating yourself up, you treat yourself like you would a friend.
Right. If your friend messed up, you'd probably say, hey, it's okay, you'll do better next time. We need to learn to say that to ourselves too.
All of these terms, imposter syndrome, self-esteem, the inner critic, and self-compassion, are connected to self-doubt. The more we understand them, the better we can work on overcoming those doubts.
And remember, even though self-doubt is normal, there are ways to build ourselves up and stop those negative thoughts. We'll dive into that more later. All right, now let's really dig into the heart of self-doubt. We all know that feeling when we second-guess ourselves or think we're not good enough. But where does it come from? One big cause is fear of failure.
Exactly. A lot of times we're afraid of making mistakes or not living up to expectations, and that fear can stop us from trying at all. We start thinking, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?
I've definitely felt that way. I remember when I was asked to give a presentation at work. The fear of messing up made me doubt myself so much that I almost said no.
And that fear can grow when we compare ourselves to others. You might see someone who seems to have it all together, and it makes you feel like you're falling behind. That comparison can make self-doubt even worse.
That's so true, Maria. We forget that people usually only show their successes, not their struggles. Comparing ourselves to their highlights makes us feel like we're not doing enough. And that's where lack of self-confidence can sneak in too.
Right. When we don't believe in our own abilities, it's easier to feel doubt. And the more we let that doubt sit, the more it affects other parts of our lives. Let's talk about how self-doubt affects our mental health.
For sure. Self-doubt can really take a toll on how we feel. It can lead to anxiety, stress, and even depression if we're constantly questioning ourselves. It makes everything feel heavier.
And it doesn't just affect our mood, it also impacts our productivity. When we doubt ourselves, we procrastinate, overthink, and avoid taking action because we're worried we won't do things perfectly.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I let self-doubt take over, I'm way less productive. I spend more time worrying about whether I can do something instead of just doing it. And it can stop us from growing as people.
Absolutely. Self-doubt can hold us back from going after new opportunities, trying new things, or pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. It keeps us stuck.
But the good news is, there are ways to overcome self-doubt. One of the first steps is building self-awareness, understanding where your doubt is coming from and recognizing when it shows up.
Yes, when you're aware of your self-doubt, you can start to question it. Ask yourself, is this fear real, or am I just being too hard on myself? Developing resilience is another key strategy. That means bouncing back from setbacks and not letting one failure define you.
A big part of resilience is learning from mistakes and knowing that failing doesn't make you a failure. It's just part of the process. And of course, we can't forget about self-compassion, being kind to yourself when things don't go perfectly.
That's so important. Instead of beating yourself up when you make a mistake, try saying something encouraging like, "It's okay, I'll do better next time." This helps quiet that inner critic we talked about earlier.
Now, we've also got some practical tips to help you work through self-doubt. One is journaling. Writing down your thoughts and doubts can help you see them more clearly and figure out if they're really true.
And don't forget about positive affirmations. Telling yourself things like, "I am capable" or "I am worthy" can really help shift your mindset over time. It might feel weird at first, but it makes a difference.
We also reached out to a few listeners on social media and asked them to share their experiences with self-doubt. Let's take a moment to read some of their stories and see what they've been through.
Here's one from Sarah. She says, "I used to doubt whether I was good enough to start my own business, but I pushed through that fear, and now I'm running a successful online store. Self-doubt still comes up sometimes, but I don't let it stop me anymore." That's such a great example of resilience.
That's awesome, Sarah. It just shows that self-doubt doesn't have to hold you back. We also have a guest with us today, Dr. Michael, a psychologist who specializes in confidence building. Dr. Michael, can you share a bit about why we experience self-doubt and what we can do about it?
Thanks, Alex. Self-doubt often stems from our brain trying to protect us from failure or rejection. It's a survival instinct. But in today's world, that fear can become exaggerated. One of the best things we can do is practice self-compassion and reframe our thinking. Instead of seeing setbacks as proof that we aren't capable, we need to see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. That's really helpful advice. As we wrap up this part of the conversation, we want to remind our listeners to interact with us. Send in your questions. Share your own stories of overcoming self-doubt. and let's keep this conversation going.
Yes. Remember, self-doubt is something everyone experiences, but with the right tools, you can push past it. You're capable of so much more than you think. Now, let's dive into a story about overcoming self-doubt. This one is about someone you may have heard of, JK Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. Her journey is a powerful example of pushing through self-doubt, and I think it's something everyone can relate to.
That's right, Alex. Before she became one of the most successful authors in history, JK Rowling faced a lot of challenges. She started writing Harry Potter while she was a single mother, struggling to make ends meet. She had no job, very little money, and was living on government assistance. On top of that, she had serious doubts about whether she could succeed as a writer.
Yeah. She even talked about how low her confidence was during this time. She had no idea if her story was good enough or if anyone would even want to publish it. Imagine working so hard on something, only to have those doubts constantly in the back of your mind.
Exactly. And despite those doubts, she kept going. Rowling finished the first manuscript of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and sent it to 12 different publishers. But guess what? All 12 rejected it. Talk about self-doubt.
Can you imagine getting rejection after rejection like that? Most people would have given up, but she didn't. Even though her self-doubt must have been at an all-time high, she believed in her story enough to keep trying.
Finally, after those 12 rejections, a small publishing house, Bloomsbury, decided to take a chance on her book. But even then, they advised her to keep her day job because they didn't think she'd make much money from a children's book. Despite all that, she pushed forward and continued to write the series.
And we all know how that turned out. The Harry Potter books went on to become one of the best-selling series of all time, and JK Rowling became a household name. But the key moment here is that she didn't let those early rejections or her self-doubt stop her from following her passion.
Exactly. Her story shows us that even when we feel like we're not good enough or when the world is telling us no, we still have to keep believing in ourselves. Self-doubt might be there, but it doesn't have to control what we do.
Let's highlight some key moments where JK Rowling confronted her self-doubt and pushed through it. First, there's the moment when she started writing the book in the first place, despite her personal struggles. That took courage and belief, even when her life circumstances were telling her otherwise.
And then, there's the rejection from all those publishers. After each rejection, she could have easily given up. Instead, she kept pushing forward. That persistence is something we can all learn from. Sometimes success is just one more try away.
Another key moment is when she finally got published, but the advice was to keep her day job because the publishers didn't expect the book to sell. Imagine how easy it would have been to let that comment reinforce her self-doubt. But instead of giving in, she kept writing the rest of the series.
What I love about her story is that it shows self-doubt doesn't just go away overnight. It's something we have to work through, sometimes over and over again. But as long as we keep moving forward, even with those doubts, we can still achieve great things.
Absolutely. I think J.K. Rowling's story is a perfect example of how self-doubt is something everyone experiences, no matter how successful they eventually become. What matters is how we respond to it.
To everyone listening, I hope this story inspires you to keep going, even when self-doubt creeps in. Remember, every successful person has faced rejection, failure, and doubt. But like J.K. Rowling, you have to keep believing in yourself and your abilities.
That's right. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's that self-doubt might slow you down, but it doesn't have to stop you. Keep pushing forward. You never know what's just around the corner. Now that we've covered some deep stuff, let's switch gears a little and dive into some fun facts about self-doubt. Did you know that self-doubt is actually super common? It turns out most of us deal with it more often than we think.
Yep. In fact, there's a study that shows up to 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at least once in their lives. That's the feeling where you think, I don't deserve this success, even if you've worked hard for it.
So basically, if you've ever felt like a fraud at work or school, you're in good company. Almost everyone has been there. And here's an interesting psychological fact. Self-doubt activates the same areas in the brain as physical pain. That's right. When you doubt yourself, your brain reacts like it's being hurt.
Wow. No wonder it feels so uncomfortable. And speaking of discomfort, did you know that our brains are wired to remember negative experiences more than positive ones? This is called the negativity bias. It's why we tend to focus on our failures or mistakes way more than our successes.
That's a great point, Maria. Our brains are basically like, oh, you made a mistake? Let's replay that 100 times. But when something goes right, we just move on. The good news is, we can train our brains to focus more on the positive by practicing self-compassion and gratitude.
Here's another quirky fact. Self-doubt can actually make you smarter. Studies have shown that a little self-doubt can make you more cautious, which leads to better decision-making. The key is finding the balance you want, enough doubt to stay sharp, but not so much that you freeze up.
That's super interesting. So, a little bit of self-doubt is actually helpful, just don't let it take over. Speaking of which, I found this surprising statistic. Women tend to doubt themselves more than men, even when they're just as qualified. For example, in job applications, men will apply if they meet only 60% of the qualifications, but women typically only apply if they meet 100%. That's a huge confidence gap.
I know, right. It's fascinating how self-doubt can be shaped by things like gender and culture. For example, in some cultures, being modest is seen as a virtue, which can sometimes turn into self-doubt. People feel like they shouldn't brag about their abilities, even when they're great at what they do.
And this isn't a new phenomenon. Even famous people from history dealt with self-doubt. For instance, Albert Einstein once said he felt like an involuntary swindler because he didn't believe he deserved all the praise he received for his work. Imagine that. The guy who literally changed science doubting himself.
That's crazy. And here's one more fact that I think is really encouraging. Confidence is a skill you can build, not something you're just born with. Psychologists say that practicing self-compassion, setting small goals, and celebrating your achievements, no matter how small, are great ways to boost confidence over time.
So true. Confidence isn't something magical that only some people have. It's something you can learn, just like any other skill. In fact, there was a study that found people who fake confidence even if they don't feel it eventually start to feel more confident. It's called the fake it till you make it effect.
I love that. And here's a fun historical fact. Did you know that Vincent van Gogh only sold one painting during his lifetime? He doubted his talent, but now his work is considered priceless. It just goes to show that sometimes your self-doubt has nothing to do with your actual talent or worth.
Wow, that's incredible. Van Gogh was ahead of his time, but he couldn't see it himself. I guess the lesson there is that sometimes other people's validation or lack of it shouldn't define how we feel about ourselves.
Exactly. And speaking of quirky facts, have you ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's when people who have low ability or knowledge in a particular area think they're really good at it. It's basically the opposite of self-doubt. It's funny, but it also shows how tricky confidence can be.
That's hilarious and kind of mind-blowing. So, while some of us struggle with self-doubt, others might be a little too confident without the skills to back it up. I guess balance really is key.
For sure. So, to wrap up this fun facts segment, let's remember, self-doubt is super common. It can be shaped by our experiences and culture, and even though it feels bad sometimes, it's something we can work on. Plus, having a little doubt isn't all bad. It can keep us grounded and thoughtful.
Exactly. And if you ever find yourself doubting your abilities, just remember that even Einstein and Van Gogh felt the same way. Keep pushing forward, because who knows? You might just surprise yourself. All right. Let's switch things up and have a real conversation about our own experiences with self-doubt. I think it's easy to talk about overcoming it in theory, but when you're in the middle of it, it can feel impossible to get out of your head. Maria, do you remember a time when self-doubt really hit you?
Oh, absolutely. I think the most memorable one was when I started my first job after college. I was working in a big company, and honestly, I felt like I was completely out of my league. I'd look around at my co-workers who seemed so confident and on top of things, and I just kept thinking, I don't belong here.
Yeah, I've been there too. What do you think caused that feeling for you?
I think it was a combination of imposter syndrome and being new in a professional environment. I felt like I had to prove myself constantly, and the pressure made me second-guess everything I did. Even when I did something right, I'd immediately start worrying about the next task.
I can relate to that so much. My experience was similar when I started out in broadcasting. I would prepare for days before a segment, but as soon as I got in front of the mic, I'd freeze up because I was convinced I was going to mess up. It's crazy because, looking back, I was doing fine. But in the moment, my self-doubt was through the roof.
Exactly. And that's the thing about self-doubt, it's not always based on reality. You could be doing great, but your mind still finds a way to undermine you. How did you deal with that, Alex? What helped you push through?
It took me a while, but one of the things that really helped was talking to people who were more experienced. I remember telling one of my mentors about how nervous I was, and he said something that stuck with me. He said, "Everyone feels like that at the beginning, but the more you do it, the more confident you'll become." And that gave me permission to mess up a bit without being so hard on myself.
That's such great advice. I think we sometimes expect ourselves to be perfect right away, but confidence comes from experience. For me, I had to learn to celebrate the small wins. Every time I did something right, even if it was tiny, I'd take a moment to acknowledge it. Over time, those little victories helped build my confidence.
Yes! And I think another thing that helped was accepting that mistakes are part of the process. Once I stopped fearing failure so much, it freed me up to take more risks and learn from the moments that didn't go perfectly.
That's huge. I remember messing up in a big meeting once. I was so embarrassed, and I spent the rest of the day replaying it over and over in my head. But the next day, I talked to my boss about it, and she wasn't even upset. In fact, she said something along the lines of, Everyone has bad days. Don't let it define you. That really changed my perspective.
It's amazing how much kinder other people can be than we are to ourselves. That's something I'm still working on, practicing self-compassion. I used to think being hard on myself would make me improve faster, but in reality, it just made me more anxious.
Same here. It's like we're our own worst critics. I've been trying to catch myself when that inner critic starts talking. Now, instead of spiraling into doubt, I ask myself, what would I say to a friend in this situation? That really helps me shift my perspective.
I love that. And I think it's important to remember that self-doubt can pop up even when you're experienced or successful. Like, I still get nervous before big projects. The difference is, now I know how to manage it better.
Exactly, it never fully goes away, but you get better at handling it. I remember reading that Beyoncé still gets nervous before her performances. If someone at her level still deals with doubt, it just shows that it's a normal part of being human.
Totally. It's so reassuring to know that even the most successful people have those moments. So for everyone listening, don't feel like you're alone in this. Self-doubt is something we all go through. But with time and practice, it gets easier to manage.
Definitely. And if I could give one piece of advice to anyone struggling with self-doubt, it's to talk to someone about it. Whether it's a friend, a mentor, or even a therapist, just saying it out loud can take some of the power away from those negative thoughts.
That's such a good point. Keeping it all inside only makes it worse. Sometimes just hearing someone else say, "I've been there," can make a huge difference.
For sure. And another thing that's helped me is stepping outside of my comfort zone more often. It's scary, but every time I try something new, I prove to myself that I can handle it. It's like building a muscle. The more you challenge yourself, the stronger your confidence gets.
Yes, that's how growth happens. And the more you push through those moments of doubt, the more you realize that self-doubt is just a feeling. It doesn't define what you're actually capable of.
Exactly. And I think the key is to be patient with yourself. Confidence doesn't come overnight, but every step forward is progress.
Well said, Maria. So, to our listeners, if you're battling self-doubt, remember that you're not alone. We've all been there, and it's something you can work through. Be kind to yourself, take it one step at a time, and don't be afraid to reach out for support.
Absolutely. Self-doubt is just one chapter in your story, not the whole book. You've got this.
All right, let's get into the practical part of the episode. We've talked a lot about self-doubt, but now we want to give you some exercises and tips you can actually use in your daily life to push through those feelings. These are simple, actionable things you can start doing today to build your confidence and challenge negative self-talk.
Exactly. We'll go through a few different techniques, so feel free to try the ones that resonate with you the most. Let's start with something really simple but effective: daily affirmations.
Yes, affirmations are a great way to reprogram your mind and replace negative thoughts with positive ones. Here's how you do it. Every morning, take a few minutes to say or write down a few positive statements about yourself. For example, you can say things like, "I am capable of achieving my goals," or "I deserve success and happiness." It might feel weird at first, but over time, these positive affirmations help reshape how you see yourself.
That's such a powerful practice. And if you're not sure where to start with affirmations, Here's a simple tip: focus on the opposite of what your self-doubt is telling you. If you find yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough," your affirmation could be, "I am more than capable of handling challenges." The idea is to counter those negative thoughts with positive ones.
That's a great point. Another powerful tool is journaling. This one is great for people who need to get their thoughts out of their head and onto paper. One journaling prompt we suggest is asking yourself, "What is causing my self-doubt?" Write down your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Sometimes, just seeing your doubts on paper makes them feel less overwhelming.
And to take it a step further, try writing out evidence that challenges your self-doubt. For example, if you're doubting your ability to succeed at work, write down a few times when you've done a great job or overcome a challenge. This helps remind you of your strengths and successes, which can get lost when you're feeling doubtful.
I love that. It's like you're building a case against your own negative thoughts. Another practice that's really helpful is mindfulness and breathing techniques. When we're overwhelmed with self-doubt, our bodies can react with stress. One simple mindfulness exercise is to take a few minutes to focus on your breathing. Try this. Close your eyes, breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, and exhale for 4. Repeat that a few times.
Mindfulness is such a great way to ground yourself in the present moment. When you're focusing on your breath or your body, you're not stuck in those anxious thoughts. And with regular practice, it can help calm your mind when self-doubt creeps in.
Exactly. And if you're someone who deals with negative self-talk a lot, here's an exercise you can do. Name your inner critic. Give that negative voice in your head a name, like Doubtful Dave or Critical Kathy. This helps you distance yourself from the negativity, and when those thoughts come up, you can say something like, "Oh, that's just Doubtful Dave talking again." It sounds silly, but it can really help.
I love that. It's a fun way to take the power away from those negative thoughts. Another exercise I've found helpful is visualization. This is where you take a few minutes to imagine yourself succeeding in whatever you're doubting. Close your eyes and picture yourself giving that presentation confidently or acing that job interview. The more detailed the visualization, the better.
Yes, visualization is such a powerful tool. Studies show that athletes, for example, use it all the time to improve performance. When you visualize yourself succeeding, your brain actually starts to believe it's possible. It's like a mental rehearsal.
And let's not forget the importance of setting small, achievable goals. When you're dealing with self-doubt, big goals can feel overwhelming. So break them down into smaller steps. For example, instead of saying, "I'm going to write a book," start with, "I'm going to write 200 words a day." These small wins help build momentum and confidence.
That's such a good point. Small wins add up over time, and they prove to yourself that you can make progress. And don't forget to celebrate your achievements, even the small ones. Whether it's finishing a task you've been putting off or stepping out of your comfort zone, take a moment to acknowledge what you've accomplished.
Absolutely. And one final tip is to surround yourself with supportive people. Doubt can feel isolating, but when you have people around you who lift you up, it's much easier to push through. Share your goals and struggles with friends or a mentor, and let them remind you of how capable you are.
That's so important. Sometimes we need an outside perspective to help us see what we're too close to notice ourselves. So, listeners, try out some of these practices. And remember, overcoming self-doubt is a journey, not something that happens overnight. Be patient with yourself.
We'd love to hear how these exercises work for you. Feel free to share your progress with us in the comments on social media or in a follow-up episode. We're all in this together, and we'd love to support you.
Yes, please do. And remember, the goal isn't to eliminate self-doubt completely. It's to learn how to manage it and keep moving forward. You've got this. All right, we're nearing the end of today's episode, but before we wrap things up, let's do a quick recap of everything we've covered. We started by talking about the causes of self-doubt, like fear of failure, comparison, and low confidence. We also touched on how self-doubt can affect our mental health and personal growth. But more importantly, we dove into practical strategies for overcoming it.
Yes, we talked about everything from using positive affirmations to rewire your mindset, to journaling as a way to challenge those negative thoughts. We also covered mindfulness techniques, visualization for building confidence, and the importance of setting small, achievable goals to create momentum. And don't forget about surrounding yourself with supportive people, who believe in you, even when you're doubting yourself.
Exactly. The key takeaway here is that self-doubt is something we all experience, but it doesn't have to control your life. With the right tools and mindset, you can learn to manage it and keep pushing forward. Remember, it's not about eliminating self-doubt entirely. It's about not letting it stop you from pursuing your goals and dreams.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest points we want you to walk away with is this. You are capable, you've already made it this far in life, and that's proof that you can continue to grow, achieve, and thrive. Self-doubt is just a feeling. It doesn't define who you are or what you can accomplish.
Right. And if you ever find yourself stuck in that cycle of doubt, just remember the practices we talked about today. Try the affirmations, the journaling prompts, or the mindfulness exercises little by little. These habits can help shift your mindset and build your confidence.
Also, don't be afraid to reach out for support. Whether it's friends, family, or even a professional, sometimes just talking about your self-doubt can take away its power. Remember, you don't have to go through this alone.
Before we sign off, we want to leave you with a motivational thought to carry with you. You are more than enough, just as you are. It's okay to have doubts, but don't let them overshadow your potential. Keep moving forward, even if it's one small step at a time.
That's right. The journey to overcoming self-doubt is ongoing, and it's okay if it takes time. Be patient with yourself and celebrate every bit of progress you make, no matter how small it seems. You're doing amazing.
And with that, we'd love for you to take action. If you found any of these practices helpful, let us know. You can share your progress with us on social media or in the comments. We'd love to hear how you're overcoming self-doubt in your own life.
Also, don't forget to check out our website, where we have free resources available to help you on your journey. You can download some journaling prompts, affirmation lists, and even a confidence-building workbook. It's all there to support you.
And if you're enjoying the podcast, make sure to hit that follow button and share it with anyone who might need a little boost in their confidence. Next week, we're diving into a new topic: building resilience in challenging times. You won't want to miss it.
That's going to be a great episode. We'll explore how to bounce back from setbacks, handle stress, and keep pushing forward even when life gets tough. Until then, remember, self-doubt doesn't stand a chance when you're determined to grow.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Stay strong, keep believing in yourself, and we'll catch you in the next episode.